My name is Stanley Richards. I am the Deputy CEO of the Fortune Society, a nonprofit organization in New York City that seeks to support successful reentry and promote alternatives to incarceration. So many disadvantaged communities are pipelines for mass incarceration. And at Fortune Society, we try to provide a healing and second chance opportunity for people returning home from jail and prison. And we provide an off ramp trying to deflect people from mass incarceration. In 2021, I was appointed as the first Deputy Commissioner of Programs and Operations at the New York City Department of Corrections. And so I oversaw all of the programs and operations, second in command to the commissioner. And I was the first formerly incarcerated person to be appointed to that position. And so it was both a full circle moment for me. As a young person, I cycled in and out of Rikers Island many times. My office on Rikers Island was facing the building where I spent time in solitary confinement when I was on Rikers Island. So it was really a full circle moment to be able to come back and to try to change the experience that so many people who are currently detained on Rikers Island have. Come back as a person of color, come back as a advocate, come back as a service provider, as a professional after turning my life around. So it was a full circle moment. As a society, we have decided to use our jails as a way to deal with mental illness, homelessness, substance abuse. All of those issues are showing up in the New York City jail system. And our officers are just not trained to manage that population. And so that's a big part of 21st century corrections. The other big part of 21st century corrections is something I observed when I went to Europe and looked at the system over in Norway. And that is their fundamental philosophy around corrections is that correction officers are almost like social workers, and they train them as such. Before a correction officer goes into a facility and is assigned a post, they go to 2 years worth of training, 1 year in the academy and 1 year on the job. And that training includes more than takedowns and submission holds and custody movement. It is filled with how to de-escalate and how to deal with incarcerated people. And their philosophy is that the conditions of confinement is not the person's punishment. The person's punishment is the removal from the community. And so we have an added element in New York City in that the majority of the people detained on Rikers Island haven't been convicted of anything. So according to our system of justice, they are innocent until proven guilty. And so you have an added element that someone who is not convicted of anything, they just can't afford bail. That's why they are detained. So that's 21st century corrections, really making sure that the officers are trained for the population we're serving right now and making sure the conditions of confinement are not such that diminishes those who work there and diminish those who are detained there. When I was in there, we have free movement. So if I had a visit, I would get a pass from the officer and I would be able to go down to the visit, walk to the visit by myself. They would have officers in the hall checking your pass, you would go. And that kind of freedom and movement came with a sense of responsibility, right? Because you didn't want to lose that, because if you messed up, then you would have to be escorted, and no one wanted to be escorted, right? You wanted to have that kind of free movement. And then somewhere between when I was in and now, they shifted that. They shut down free movement, and everything is an escort. So now that really raises temperatures, right? Because if you got a visit, you have to wait for an escort officer. If they are facing a shortage of officers, they won't have an escort officer because they need to have the priority is to have an officer in the housing areas, right? In the A post and the B post. The A post is manning the controls. The B post is inside the housing area, observing what's going on in the sleeping area. And so you are frustrated. They call for a visit. You know your family's down there. You have to wait for an escort. What do you think happens? Voices go up. The incarcerated person starts getting angry, pissed off, might start throwing stuff, might curse the officer out. And so it creates this whole sense of frustration and anger. And the A officer has to receive all of that, and they can't really do anything because they got to wait for an escort officer to come get somebody on a visit. That's the same thing with commissary. That's the same thing with medical. That's why you read in the papers how many missed medical appointments now, because it takes an escort officer to move somebody from the housing area down to the clinic. And when there's a shortage of officers, the medical, probably now the medical's a priority, but medical versus do I leave 18 upper with one officer watching two sides? Those are the decisions that have to be made. And so that's the environment we find ourselves in right now. A very horrible situation. And that is something that the borough-based jail hopefully will solve for. As I said, the design is all designed about movement. So how do we allow people to move to services, healthcare, without a one-on-one escort? And so those are the design principles that we hope that the architect and the developer use to build out the new borough-based jail. But that is also the situation we find ourselves in right now. And even if you have an officer who really wants to do the right thing, their hands are sort of tied, and the incarcerated person's frustrated and the officer is frustrated. I think we have to close Rikers. We have to build a smaller borough-based system that is fully transparent because it's located in each of the boroughs. It's smaller, so we can never go back to 22,000 people being incarcerated in the New York City Department of Corrections system, and its facilities built using humanity at the center of design, architect, and operations. And this is a two-way street, right? This is humanity for those who have to be detained there. It's humanity for the officers who have to work there. It's humanity for the families who have to visit. I can tell you, we have a heat wave now in New York. Last year, we had heat waves. And when I used to tour the facilities, I used to see officers drenched, because they are too, in those facilities with no AC, in hallways with big fans that blow nothing but more hot air, but they have to wear these uniforms that are probably polyester and cotton that just keep heat in. And it was horrible. It was horrible for them, and it was horrible for the people who had to be detained there. And so when you're asking an officer to pay attention, to be present, and to be engaging when they are in the midst of that kind of heat wave, and you ask an incarcerated person to be patient, we're going to get water, we're going to get ice, they're in the midst. Tempers are short, fuses are short, and it's just a total disaster. So we need to close Rikers, and we need to build smaller borough-based facilities that are centered on the humanity of everybody, where there is AC, where there is programming space, where there is space for officers, where there's training space, where there's space for incarcerated people to move around and engage. That's what we need to do. And I'm glad the mayor is following through with it and has made a commitment to close Rikers by 2027.